Hi there, and welcome to a Let's Type episode from the Commodore 64 Appreciation Society. This is a series where I type out a program from an old computer magazine, and then when I finish typing it in, I play it. Hangar 14 has a wonderfully ridiculous premise. A cargo rocket has been hijacked on the metal planet Metallion, and naturally, the greater Andromeda Biscuit company sends in a robot to deal with it. You know, perfectly normal 1987 video game stuff. But while typing this one in, I found something even stranger. A line of Commodore 64 code that looks completely wrong. Not unusual wrong, but instantly obviously wrong. Except it isn't, and I'm very curious to find out why. Let's get typing. Hangar 14 was written by Justin Luton and published in the January 1987 issue of Ahoy. And I've got to say, he absolutely nailed the background lore. I mean, seriously, the Greater Andromeda Biscuit Company? That's a legendary name. It sounds like something from an anime series where the company manufactures battle mechs instead of snack food. We play a robot tasked with retrieving a stolen rocket from its hiding place in Hangar 14. We'll be running across metal floors, we're on Metallion, jumping craters and keeping ourselves magnetized so we can make the long jumps. But maybe my favorite part is that Hangar is spelled wrong, which somehow makes the whole thing even better. I'm inspired. Let's get this typed in and find that rocket. I have a Biscuit company to save. Maybe even more charming is the fact that Hangar 14 is basically a Hunchback clone. Hunchback is a classic platformer from Century Electronics and one of the earliest hits for the Commodore 64. I actually covered it in an earlier video, and the story behind it is pretty interesting. It inspired a few clones, but by 1987, the commercial gaming industry had mostly moved on from that kind of thing. Magazines, though, were a different story. Clones remained a type-in staple, and we've already seen games based on Centipede, Frogger, Adventure, and plenty of others. These classic concepts were approachable for bedroom coders to recreate, and for the legions of kids typing them in, immediately easy to understand. So, a Hunchback clone in 1987, for a magazine type-in, that's absolutely on brand. Year-end lists and retrospectives are a staple of magazines released in January, and this month's issue of Ahoy is no exception. Their review of the finest funware of 1986 is a fascinating snapshot of where Commodore 64 gaming stood at the time. By 1986, developers had figured out how to truly push the Commodore 64, and with millions of machines still sitting in homes, that mattered because competition for those players was fierce, and polished, sophisticated games were the best way to stand out. Which is a big part of why 1986 was such a ridiculously good year for Commodore 64 games. Ahoy breaks out the top games across a number of categories, and I thought it would be fun to take a quick look through them. In strategy, they highlight some absolute heavy hitters, with Elite leading the charge. Even today, Elite feels astonishingly ambitious, a sprawling economic and combat simulation that somehow fit on a Commodore 64. For adventure games, Ahoy argued that 1986 was the year graphical adventures finally surpassed Infocom-style text adventures in depth and playability. Looking at the games they chose? Honestly, fair point. Sports games are next, and this was always one of my favorite genres. By 1986, sports titles were starting to actually resemble sports instead of abstract moving shapes, with richer statistics and deeper simulations. But the most interesting category is action, because Ahoy thought it hit rock bottom. They felt players were getting tired of repetitive arcade concepts and wanted something fresher and more sophisticated. But even here they saw signs of a rebound, with newer games starting to push the genre in more interesting directions. The article ends with Ahoy asking whether 1986 would be the last great year for Commodore 64 games. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Hangar 14 is a classic Commodore 64 program. Written in BASIC, it includes hardware sprites through the VIC-II chip, direct joystick reads, custom characters, and a little memory trickery up front. In other words, all the usual suspects. But one of those tricks is especially interesting because it looks exactly like a mistake. Let's dive in. Take a look at this line. Why is Z assigned two different values, one immediately after the other? The first one would never even get used. That has to be a mistake, right? Nope. One of the Commodore 64 signature features is the VIC-II chip, which handles sprite graphics directly in hardware. And one particularly useful thing it does, collision detection. This line is reading two VIC-II memory locations, 53278 and 53279. These are the collision registers. One tracks sprite to sprite collisions, the other tracks sprite to background collisions. And here's the weird part. Simply reading those registers clears them. So this strange looking line is really just housekeeping. It clears the collision registers at the start of the game loop. And Z, it isn't even used. In fact, it only exists because BASIC just doesn't let you peek at memory. You have to assign the result somewhere. From there, the game checks the joystick, moves the sprites, and the VIC-II automatically watches for collisions in the background. If something gets hit, the chip updates those registers. And a few lines later, Hangar 14 checks them. If a collision happened, H gets set to 1. And that's bad news because it means you hit something and off you go to the death routine. Otherwise, back to the top of the loop where the collision registers get cleared again by simply looking at them. Cool, right? As far as type-ins go, this one has been pretty breezy. It's taken just over an hour to type in the program, and this last bit is all data statements for the sprites, which we'll be watching for collisions. It's also interesting to see a game number their lines like this. Normally you see 10, 20, 30, etc., but this one started at 1 and every line just increased by 1. This must have been done by the magazine after it was received. No programmer in their right mind would ever work this way. Way too tough to make changes. Either way, we're now on line 157, which just happens to be the final one. And we're done. Nice. We'll save that, and then just for fun, let's try running it. I haven't done any debugging yet, but one day I'll actually type in something that just works the first time. But not this time. Out of data errors are annoying. I must have goofed up one of the statements somewhere. But that's not what I noticed here. I unconsciously spelled hangar correctly and need to change it back. That's painful. Fortunately, Ahoy has a debugger called Bug Repellent. It's a machine language program that sits in memory and gets run after the program has been entered. We then walk through the values it outputs and compare it with what's in the magazine. It's not quite as nice as the debuggers that provide the values instantly, but it works. Now it's just a matter of working through each line. Which took longer than I expected. Altogether, I found 22 errors. The first one is on line 2, which looks the same as it does in the magazine. I mean, except for the trailing space, but that can't be it, right? Oh wow, that's annoying. Why would he use unnecessary spaces in the checksum? Okay. Well, the next error was in line 9. Oh, and that's an easy one. I missed setting the TI string value, which, to be honest, I've never actually seen as 10, but okay. And let's do 13 while we're at it. Oh, I see that one right away. There's a 0 instead of a bracket. Cool, those ones are off the list. .156 and 157 both showed errors, but I couldn't find anything wrong. I basically just retyped over the lines, and when I checked again, they worked. Weird, but I'm not going to ask any questions here. The important thing is that we should now be able to play the game. And nice, here we go. I like the screen layout, except for that box, which I guess is where our rocket is. I don't like how it intersects with the background. But maybe that's just how things go at the Greater Andromeda Tea Biscuit Company. Alright, let's go. Oh, seriously? There's that TI string variable again. I bet that's the problem. And yeah, Ahoy published a couple of corrections in a later edition, and sure enough, TI string should have had 6 zeros. I should have just gone with my gut and put them in. There's another fix as well to line 99. And there it is. Should have one extra up symbol at the end. Okay, hopefully that takes care of things. We'll just save this. And here we go. Well, at least we know the collision detection works. Nice. Okay, level 2. And here's where it really starts feeling like Hunchback. There's another dead robot. The instructions say that you should go a bit over the edge to jump. Just like that. Nice. Next level. The game plays quite smoothly for something written all in BASIC. No door will stop me. So the idea is that these magnets are what allow you to move over the gaps when you jump. Which I should have done here. Oh, cool. I love that little game over effect. Alright, let's do this again. I have a rocket to save. And hopefully some tea biscuits to eat. Seriously, this fourth screen is tough. It shouldn't be this hard, but I just have to be precise. Which I'm definitely not being. I'll get through it. Come on. The Appreciation Society will take away my joystick for this. Woohoo! Success! Oh, unbelievable. But it's not game over yet. Here we go. Not a bad move if I do say so. Sweet. Oh no, just one more life. I'm so glad there's nothing shooting at me here. And hey, there's the rocket. Oh no, run away! Ah, so close. I'm getting better though, next time. And here we go. And yay! I've saved the greater Andromeda Tea Biscuit Company. Cookies for everyone. The game loops from here, but honestly, for a type-in, this is terrific. Hunchback is one of my favorites, so playing a clone is right up my alley. The repeated levels do feel identical to the early ones, so a little extra difficulty progression would have been nice. But aside from that, and the weird box overlapping the bricks, there's not much I'd change. But if you have any ideas of your own, drop them in the comments, or better yet, drop by our Discord. You can download the game there, discuss changes, and even upload new versions. I also have a copy of Ahoy's bug repellent there in case you'd like to try typing it in yourself. Congratulations to Justin Luton on a really fun game, and thanks to Ahoy for publishing it way back in January 1987. Now, if you don't mind me, I have to find me some more tea biscuits. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. And if you have any memories of Hangar 14, Ahoy Magazine, or typing in your own programs, I'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments. And oh yeah, don't forget to pop by the Discord if you'd like to download a copy of the game. The link's in the description. Hope to see you again.